So I came across this piece from the BBC that speaks about the shifting geopolitical landscape in Eastern Africa, and it got me thinking. Um, for a very long time, Kenya has been considered a more advanced democracy to its peers around Eastern Africa. In the 70s, journalists, normal citizens, politicians, and foreigners who were living in Uganda fled to Kenya in fear of their lives following the repressive policies and actions of former Ugandan strongman Idi Amin Dada. Somalia as a country has had insecurity for the longest time. In the events that led up to the collapse of the Somali government in the 90s, Kenyan government was instrumental in housing political refugees, whether it was regular citizens, journalists, politicians. In fact, if my memory serves me right, there was a time in the 2000s where the legitimate Somali government was ran partially from Kenya in view of a very volatile situation in Somalia. Victims of the Rwanda genocide found a safe haven in Kenya after 1994. It is the very same thing with people running away from persecution in Southern Sudan. Rather, in Sudan, when the South was fighting for freedom. In fact, the peace talks that led to the emancipation of Southern Sudan from the rest of Sudan were held in Nairobi. Nairobi has been used as a base for dialogue, for negotiations between parties that find themselves in disharmony. This is the same case with dissidents from Ethiopia and Eritrea. The point is that people around Eastern Africa have always found Kenya to be safe, to be a safe place to run to when their governments hunted them down in order to kill them for disagreeing with them. Flash forward to 2024, 2025, Kenya has become the very thing it used to hate. In November last year, Ugandan opposition leader Kizza Besigye was abducted by Ugandan security forces in Nairobi and transported to Uganda. They disappeared him for 4 days and then he showed up in a military court. Now keep in mind that Kizza Besigye is now a civilian. It's long since he's been in the military. This operation in a foreign country, in Kenya, would have been unheard of in the past. But clearly, the Kenyan political setup, the Kenyan leaders greenlit this operation. This year, in a bid to try and defend Kizza Besigye at court, Kenyan lawyer Martha Karua and her team faced a lot of frustrations from the Ugandan government. At some point, she did not get a permit to practice. She could not represent the man without getting the required credentials, and they frustrated her until they couldn't. Take the case of what happened this year. Tanzania's opposition leader Tundu Lissu has been in jail, accused of trying to overthrow the government. You know how that goes in East Africa. And some Kenyan activists, lawyers, and political aspirants went over there to attend the hearing. Some of them were held at the airport. They were immediately arrested at the airport. They were immediately deported back to Nairobi. so that they could not visit with Tundu Lissu in his court case. In the same breath, other two activists, Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuhaire, a Ugandan activist, were allowed entry into Tanzania, but were then arrested. They were tortured. They were sexually assaulted by Tanzanian law enforcement, and they were dumped at their country's border points. Way before the case of Boni and Agatha, Tanzanian activist Maria Sarungi was abducted by unknown people in Nairobi and released a few hours later. These are Tanzanian national. This points to an escalating collision between these three East African countries to suppress the voice of the people. We have come to a point whereby the dictators have bonded together to harass the subjects. It's a sad example of what our country, Kenya, has become. Once a beacon for democracy in East Africa, it has become an enabler of abductions, torture, sexual assault, and murder of citizens across East Africa. This is why we need to vote and vote right. We need to send a strong message that our country does not stand for what it used to stand for. We need to get it right this time.